24th, 2020 to order. Roll call, please.
Sullivan here.
Hello here.
Lorick here. Kavich here.
Guzikowski here.
Seifert here.
Chandler here.
Okay. We still do have a quorum. Before we go on to the approval of minutes, Carrie, would you please read the notice of video conferencing into the record, please?
The City of Oak Creek is authorized to hold this public meeting remotely during the COVID-19 public health emergency under the March 16th and March 20th advisories from the Office of Open Government and the Wisconsin Department of Justice. Per the advisories, this meeting being conducted via Zoom video conference with telephone conferencing capabilities was duly noticed per the City of Oak Creek Municipal Code and statutory notice requirements more than 24 hours in advance of the meeting. Members of the public have been advised of the options for participation via direct mailing to property owners within 300 feet of a proposal, via the COVID-19 information page on the city's website, via social media, and via the information contained on the meeting agenda. This meeting may also be viewed at the city's YouTube page, the link for which was contained in the aforementioned notice methods. The meeting recording will also be accessible in the city's YouTube page within 48 hours. Plan commissioners and participants are initially muted upon joining the meeting. Plan commissioners and staff have the ability to mute and unmute their microphones throughout the meeting. Please mute at all times except for roll call, motions, voting, and when recognized by the chair. Roll call and voting will occur per the usual and customary procedures, starting from the Plan Commissioner seating positions south to north in the Common Council chambers. The chair will facilitate questions and comments by calling on each Plan Commissioner or by requesting the use of the raise hand function in the Zoom webinar control panel. Only speak once you have been recognized by the chair or moderator. Applicants, their representatives, and all other participants who wish to speak will be unmuted when there is a direct request for information from the Plan Commissioner staff, when the participant utilizes the raise hand function within the Zoom webinar control panel and the moderator verbally indicates that they are unmuted, and when a phone participant dials *9 to indicate that they wish to speak and the moderator verbally indicates that their line is open. When unmuted, all participants must state their name and address for the record, then proceed with comments or questions. Questions and comments may also be entered into the Q&A function within the Zoom webinar control panel. Staff and/or the moderator will monitor this function during the meeting and provide the information requested. There shall be no private messages or side conversations during the meeting utilizing the chat or Q&A functions. Chat and Q&A messages are part of the public record. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Carrie. Just for the record, Commissioner O'Danny has joined us, and Commissioner Hanna was just sent the link. Her link was not working for whatever particular reason. So when she joins us, make sure we put that into the record. That gets us to item 3, approval of the minutes from November 10th, 2020. If commissioners would please take a look. And when you're satisfied there's no errors, omissions, or corrections, we'll entertain a motion.
Seifert moves to approve the minutes of November 10th, 2020.
Guzikowski will second.
Roll call.
Sullivan, aye.
Hello, I.
Mark, aye. Kavich, aye.
Guzikowski, aye.
Bonnie, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, I.
Thank you. Did Christine just join us, or am I hearing things? Either way. Will now get us to significant common council actions. Carrie, if you would.
Council approved an ordinance adopting an amendment to the comprehensive plan for the property at 9141 South 13th Street to Business Park. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Item 5A, landscape plan review. This is a review of a revised landscape plan submitted by Kevin Kennedy, Walden OC LLC for a multifamily residential building and commercial building on the property at 7700 South Akia Way. Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This was held at the November 10th meeting, and the reasons for which were that it was missing some details, including for plantings, height, and installation. Staff also recommended that the landscape plans include labels or callouts to identify the proposed plantings on the plan a little bit more clearly. And because of these missing items, staff could not make a determination as to whether the proposed landscape plan was in conformance with the PUD and master landscape plan. So we do have a revised plan that has been submitted. There have been some updates, including the symbol identification that staff recommended. The heights have been included for some of the plantings, although we do still have mostly container sizes. We do need to have the required installation height due to the requirements in the PUD and code for the installation and maintenance of the screening materials at a height of 3 to 6 feet. So we do need to have those items updated. We also need to have easements shown on the landscape plans to ensure that we do not have any plantings that are interfering with the infrastructure. So there are a couple of items in the landscape plan that were recommended in the staff report for update. And what we're looking at here are particularly the 10 parking stalls that are adjacent to Creekside Crossing Circle. This garnered some discussion at the last review. In the master landscape guidelines, there is a provision to include ornamental grasses and or perennials in addition to the required shrub plantings. And what staff is recommending here is there are a couple of areas in between the planting areas for screening of the parking to include those ornamental grasses or perennials to further screen those parking stalls. Otherwise, we would have some gaps in that screening. That same master landscape guideline is also being recommended along the eastern parking areas adjacent to the single-family residential property to include some plantings in between the proposed plantings. Now, there is a caveat to this. There is quite a bit of grade that is being proposed here in terms of slope. There may be a requirement for either grading to knock that slope down, as we did discuss in the overall site plan review, or there may be a requirement for a retaining wall, in which case the landscape plan would have to be adjusted to accommodate those. However, we are still recommending, as if the landscape plan that's being proposed can be accommodated in those plans, to incorporate the additional ornamental grasses or perennials in between those groupings to further screen those parking stalls from that adjacent property. There are a couple of other provisions that we would like to point out to the Plan Commission. Pertinences have to be 100% screened. Those have not been identified on the plans as of yet. So we will require that the plans be amended to incorporate those whenever they have been cited to ensure that they are adequately screened per the PUD requirement and per code. Also, there was a mention in the staff report regarding the plant list. There was an approved plant list as part of the master landscape plan for Creekside Crossing Marketplace. And there were a few items that were highlighted in the staff report that were not part of that master landscape plan plant list. So there is a provision within the master landscape plan as well for those plants that are not included in the approved plant list to be approved by the developer. We do wish to see that the plant list be utilized to the fullest extent possible. So if there can be an adjustment made to conform with the current plant list, that would be a recommendation that we have in the staff report. So with that, if the Plan Commission has no objections to the proposal, there is a suggested motion with conditions 1 through 3 on the screen for consideration. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Before we go to the commission, Kevin is the applicant with us. Would they like to say a few words, or is there anybody out there by chance that has any questions before we take it to the commission?
Sure. We have the owner, the developer, the civil engineer, and the architect, and the developer is raising his hand. Dan, we'll need your name and address for the record and organization, and you should be able to unmute yourself.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. This is Dan Romnick from Mandel Group. My address is 4524 North 105th Street in Wauwatosa. And I just wanted to say that we've taken a look at the staff report and in response to the suggestions or the report, we'd be happy to make any recommended changes to the landscape plan in terms of plantings and provide the height of the plants at installation as well. So if there's, I don't have any other presentations, so if there's any other questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but that's all I have for now.
Okay, thank you, Dan. With that, we'll open it up to the commission. Christine, I know you had a little problems getting on there with the link. Nice to see you, but would you like to start us out?
Sure, thank you. Actually, I did review it and I don't have any comments. All the recommendation done by planning looks good to me.
Thank you. Matt?
I have no comments either.
Okay. Dawn?
Nothing for me.
Okay. Greg?
I have no questions or issues. It sounds like they're willing to work with staff and make those changes, so I'm good with it. Thank you.
Very good. Chris?
Yes, I concur with everyone else so far. Thank you.
Okay. Don?
Yeah, I'm fine with it.
Okay. Fred?
Yeah, I got one question.
Mhm.
Are they going to carry this landscaping plan over to the full development? Or is this going to be just strictly this area right now?
I can answer that. This is Carrie. This is specifically for this particular parcel within the development. However, the master landscape plan that was approved by the Plan Commission in March will carry over to the rest of the development. And all the subsequent individual lot developments would have to be in conformance with that approved master landscape plan.
Thank you.
Okay. Chauncey?
Yes, I have a question for the applicant. I know the applicant referred to making the updates to the different plantings. Can you provide information on if you'll also make the applicable updates to the parking lot?
Yeah, that should not be an issue. I think specifically on the northern section with the 10 on Creekside Circle, yes, this one, that should not be an issue. I think the only, and we'd be more than happy to work with staff on the eastern border, just determining what the best solution is. Again, as Carrie mentioned, the grade, you can kind of see in the picture on the right that those lines that are bunched together indicate a pretty steep grade. So we'll just have to find the best solution to provide the appropriate screening within those, but we're happy to work with the staff on what that best solution is.
Thank you.
Okay. Is that it from everybody? I guess, I concur. I think it's a good plan. I think staff's done a good job. I like the addition, the idea of the ornamental grasses. They grow up, they make a great screen. They aid the wildlife. I think it's a good plan overall. So I have no problems with it at all. Seeing no further discussion, we'll look for a motion on 5A.
Lorick moves that the Plan Commission approves the landscape plans submitted by Kevin Kennedy, Walden OC LLC for a portion of the property at 7700 South IKEA Way, Lot 4 of CSM to be recorded with the following conditions. Number 1, that all relevant code requirements remain in effect. Number 2, that all conditions of approval from the November 10th, 2020 Plan Commission review are in effect. And number 3, that a revised landscape plan incorporating staff comments is submitted in digital format for review by the Department of Community Development prior to the submission of building permit applications.
Guzekowski will second.
Roll call.
Hannah, aye.
Sullivan, I.
Grillo, aye.
Lorick, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Lonnie, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, I.
Okay. Thank you very much. And again, Dan, just please continue to work with staff. And, we have trust, all the right decisions will be made that way. Appreciate you coming tonight. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Thanks, everyone. You too.
Okay. New business. 6A, it is a sign plan review. It's proposed master sign plan submitted by Dan Rosenthal of Mid-America Real Estate for the multi-tenant commercial building, 2345 West Ryan Road. Carrie, if you would, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a master sign plan and sign program for the existing multi-tenant commercial building that is existing on the property. You may recall some of the plan commissioners who have been reviewing the sign plans for quite a while. You may recall that this building was actually constructed back in 2006. Now that's actually prior to the code requirement for multi-tenant commercial buildings or industrial buildings to have a master sign plan. And therefore, there have been some issues over the years with applying the sign code to this particular property. Many variances have been sought for the end cap tenants, and that's in particular what triggered this particular review before the Plan Commission. Variances have only been granted to one of the tenants, and that's the east end cap tenant. The west end cap has only been allowed to have one sign, or it's been vacant. So right now, we do have a tenant in that west end cap that is requesting additional signs, and they were provided two options. One was to pursue variances as had been requested in the past. However, there was a risk that there was, variances had been denied for the tenant spaces in the past. The second option, and the one that we are talking about this evening, and staff had been helping the applicant and the consultant to present to the Plan Commission, is the master sign plan, and that's been submitted by the landlord for the property. Now, the proposal in a nutshell allows for each of the tenant spaces to have one sign on the north elevation, and that's calculated at 1 square foot of signage for every lineal foot of tenant space, tenant frontage. And that is allowed up to a maximum length of 75 feet of the frontage and a maximum sign height overall of 3 feet. And one sign would be allowed on the west elevation for that end cap and one sign on the east elevation for the other end cap. They would be allowed to have a maximum square footage equal to their north elevation. This chart shows you what all of the allowed signs on the building would be, the maximum square footage and the maximum length. Again, the end cap tenants would be the only tenants that would be allowed to have two signs. And per the master sign program, which has a few other items that are going to be regulated by the landlord, no signs would be allowed on the south except for those required on the doors to identify the tenants. This is a graphic that shows what the north elevation would look like in the master concept. Now, again, this is an existing building with existing signage, and that'll be important when we get to this one change that staff is requesting. The end cap tenants, again, will have the same square footage allowance as for the north. The monument sign is existing. They're not proposing any changes to that. The one change before we get into the suggested motion is for the section on section E of the master sign program. And this was in the staff report, and we're requesting as part of the suggested motion that this be amended to clarify that any signs, regardless of whether or not they were in existence prior to the adoption of this particular master sign plan, would still have to abide by code. There have been some temporary signs that were in place in this area, perhaps not for this particular building, but in the area. We just want to make sure that everybody is aware that we do have signs that need to abide by code. And we do have signs that if they are in place, they may need permits. So with that, the suggested motion is for approval on the screen for Plan Commission consideration. Mr. Mayor.
Great, thank you, Carrie. Again, before we go to commission, is the applicant or anybody wishing to have a comment on the plan sign review?
We do have the applicant rep available if there are questions for him.
Thank you, Kevin. With that, we will go to the commission. We'll start with Commissioner Chandler this time.
I do have a question for Carrie. So since this is a modification to the master plan, will we still need conditional use permits for the one that's already existing for the west end cap?
No, the west end cap was allowed to have the signs that are on there right now through the variance process. This would establish the master sign program for all signs moving forward, again, with the caveat that any signs that are on the building would still have to abide by code requirements and permitting requirements. But that particular end cap was granted a variance.
Okay, thank you.
Super. Coming back the other way, Fred.
No, I don't see any problems.
Okay. Don.
No, this seems pretty straightforward. It's more like a cleanup of language than anything to me. So I have no problems with it.
Agreed. Chris.
Just one question, maybe for Carrie. Carrie, you know, this building's got a bunch of different sign colors and shapes. Is this going to help with cleaning up the image or the look of the building? I'm not saying it's bad, but it's just there's a bunch of different looks when you're looking at the building. If you could just speak to that. Otherwise, I don't have any issues.
As part of the master sign program, and again, this is not something that staff would have any control over, that the city doesn't really regulate that kind of thing. There is a provision within the master sign plan for signs to either be white or incorporate their company logos, but they are all going to be of the same font, I believe. That would be something to confirm with the applicant. As far as, you know, different tenants have differing facade enhancements, shall we say. There is nothing in the master sign plan that would regulate awning color, for example, or awning style. That would still have to abide by building code. And if they are proposing any signage on those awnings, that would require a master sign plan amendment, because that was not something that was included in this one. The one thing that was included would be the prohibition on lighting for those awnings.
Okay.
I do know that an existing tenant does have or did have lights to illuminate their awning. I think they were gooseneck lights that had down lighting on it, not up lighting or you know, recessed lighting underneath. But as part of this, as long as it's compliant with every other section of code, it's been permitted properly and everything, that would be allowed to remain until there were changes made to that particular tenant space per the master sign plan. So over time, yes, this will become a little bit more, there will be more of a common theme for the signs on the building.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Hey, Chris. Dawn? Or I'm sorry, Greg.
Yeah.
Jumped over
No,
one.
no questions, thank you.
Dawn.
Nothing from me.
Matt
Nothing from me.
and Christine.
Nothing here. Thank you.
No, I have nothing. I agree. I think it's kind of a cleanup. It actually will really just kind of set the rules in place. It's probably much needed. I would agree with that. I normally don't do this, but on signs, maybe it adds, maybe it helps fire. I mean, Assistant Chief Havey, anything from fire? I know you guys normally don't weigh in. You don't care because you go to the address, but maybe the signage helps.
Mike Havey, Assistant Chief with Fire. So my thoughts on signs is they are helpful for emergency response vehicles. Due to our dispatch processing, if the name of the address is tied, especially with suites, we can identify the name of the suite or where the address is tied to a name. So it does help to some extent. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I have no problems with it. And if there aren't any further questions or comments, we can move on 6A.
Guzekowski will make a motion that the Plan Commission approves the master sign plan submitted by Dan Rosenfeld, Mid-America Real Estate for multi-tenant commercial building at 2345 West Ryan Road with the following condition: that Section E, existing signs, graphics, and illumination is amended to require that all signs, regardless of whether existing prior to the establishment of this master sign plan program, shall conform to the requirements of the municipal code.
Seibert seconds.
Roll call?
Hannah, I.
Sullivan, I.
Grillo, I.
Lorik, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Ladani, aye.
Seibert, aye.
Chandler, I.
Okay, thank you very much. Once again, thank you for coming in today, and enjoy your Thanksgiving. Gets us to new business in 6B, and that is consideration of a conditional use permit submitted by Samuel Dickman of the Dickman Company. This is for a freight yard, freight terminal, transshipping depot facility on the property at 10303 South Oakview Parkway. Carrie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This property is currently zoned M1 PUD. It is part of Oakview Business Park. In fact, it's at the northwest corner of the park. The entrance is off of Oakwood Road, and the proposal is for freight yard, freight terminal, transshipment depot facilities, or what we would normally refer to as distribution facilities. The site and building plans for this particular parcel are actually on the next agenda item for Plan Commission consideration. So we will be spending the remainder of this meeting discussing this property. Potential uses within the proposed building include warehouse, light assembly, and distribution. And although there have not been any tenants that have been identified, the building can accommodate a single tenant up to 4. There are about 28 depressed docks and 4 at-grade docks on the west side of the proposed building. They are anticipating 80 employees, although that may change based on the type of users that end up being tenants in this building. They show parking for 28 trailers with 28 future parking stalls on the west side of that dock area and 110 parking stalls on the east for all employees and visitors, each of which would be accessed by the different access points off of South Oakview Parkway. Anticipated hours for the tenants within the building right now are estimated at 6 to 7. However, that will likely change based on the tenant's operational needs. One quick announcement about the outdoor storage that was mentioned in the staff report, that it would be limited to the parking of trailers and trucks in the loading dock area. Now that could be at the docks themselves, although there are, as we did see in the site plan, 28 parking stalls. There would be no provision for additional outdoor storage, and the tenants, based on their particular business operations, may require additional conditional uses depending on what the extent of their business is. There are several considerations that were mentioned in the staff report that the Plan Commission should consider as part of their review for this conditional use permit. One, a bit of history. There was a traffic impact analysis that was done for the entire park. And that considered, amongst other things, uses and estimated square footage for those uses in order to provide for adequate design of the infrastructure serving the park. With this particular conditional use permit, the overall infrastructure capacity for truck traffic is nearing and will exceed the limits that were established by that TIA. So what does that mean? That means that if this conditional use permit is recommended for approval and ultimately approved by the Common Council, that future considerations for any kind of distribution or logistics on the property, or as part of the overall park, would require a new TIA to be conducted in order to evaluate the existing conditions of the park and identify those infrastructure upgrades that would be required. It would also, it would lead to additional conversations regarding establishment of those responsibilities for the upgrades and timing for those required installations. Additional considerations for the conditional use permit, if recommended for approval, may include in the conditions and restrictions a limit on the number of docks or tenant spaces if the Plan Commission determines that that's appropriate. And the approval for this CUP does not preclude or relieve the applicant from future reviews. It does not preclude or relieve the landowners remaining in the park from those additional reviews in the future. That may include, but not be limited to, updating the PUD and establishing or revising development agreements for those required infrastructure upgrades. With that information, there is a suggested motion on the screen for approval by the Plan Commission. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Kevin is the applicant. Would they like to say anything, or are they just available for questions?
They are available for questions, and then we did have a neighbor sign up to speak as well.
Sure. Please allow the neighbor in, please.
All right. Maggie, you should be able to unmute yourself, and then we'll need your name and address for the record.
Sure. I'm Maggie Menard Miller, 320 West Oakwood Road. We live directly across from where the trucks would be coming and going. And we also, on a northern part of our property, is bordered by the FedEx truck terminal. So what you're proposing here tonight is having truck terminals both to the south and to the north of our residents in a residential area. I take this as being quite unfair. If there's other space available in that park, I would think yet another truck terminal would be more appropriately placed someplace else than directly across to and next to properties that are clearly residential. We had a nice quiet neighborhood here for a long time, and we've been promised earth berms and whatnot, and we'll talk about that in the next point. But I think overall that this is a really bad choice to have directly across from our residential area, which has been eroded already with the increased traffic that's nonstop from the employees, illegal trucks and trucks that are legal, but yet are very fast, and they don't slow down on Oakwood Road enough. My husband also would like to talk about this, I think, right?
We'll need his name and address, please,
Sure.
Maggie.
I'm Tom Miller, Mueller, same address, 320 West Oakwood. I'm wondering why this isn't on the corner across from where their neighbor would be Yaskawa and not be squashing houses.
And we'll answer that as we move forward and we get a little deeper in here, Tom.
Okay.
We'll let the applicant speak, and then we'll go from there. So
Okay.
I'm just making some notes here.
Yeah. I just think it's unfair to have them both, basically surrounding us now. It'll just lead to more violations on the road of the truck traffic. 5 a.m. somebody always is coming down the road every morning. It wakes you up. Our house is set off the road a little bit, but I know the Germscheids down the road, they're leaving Oak Creek. They're planning to sell in the spring. They've had it with the traffic, basically. You can't walk on the road without just about getting hit. I'm a runner. I'm out there a lot, and I've seen a lot of near misses. And it's just not right. This is supposed to be residential.
We had really hoped, this is Tom again, that when something was proposed across from us, it would be more like that medical type building that's inside the park a bit, you know, something a little more general and attractive to look at. I saw Carrie's photos here in the agenda today, that great big agenda, and you know, I called it a behemoth. That's the first word that came to my mind. Behemoth.
We've been here since 1978.
Gotcha. Okay. Is that it for now, Maggie and Tom?
I guess. Well, until the landscape proposal.
Oh, okay. Okay, with that, I know the applicant was gonna just wait for questions, so.
Mr. Mayor, Sam Dickman did just raise his hand.
Oh, okay, then allow him to speak, please.
All right. Sam, you should be able to speak. We'll need your name and address and company for the record.
Sam Dickman, 626 East Wisconsin Avenue, Milwaukee. A couple of comments. Number one, I believe that using the lot to the east of where we're proposing the building would not be acceptable to the city of Oak Creek. I believe they want to save that for corporate headquarters. So, and second, this is the last lot that could accommodate a building of this size in the park. We own 4 other properties within Oakview, and we think we've been very good neighbors, very sensitive to the surrounding people. This is not a truck terminal. What we're proposing is a large industrial building. Could have truck tenants in there, but there could be other tenants as well. But it is an industrial building, and there is going to be truck traffic no matter what kind of a use goes on there. So we have tried to be very sensitive to the neighbors by proposing an extensive landscape plan with berming, distancing from the neighboring properties, and screening and this sort of thing. So as well as designing a building that we think is very, very attractive. So we're making a bet on Oak Creek, proposing this deal is probably around $12 million. And, you know, we don't have a tenant right now, so we're confident that we will get, but you know, this is a big operation for us, and we're trying to do it as responsibly as possible. That's
Okay.
just it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. With that, we'll go to the commission. Christine?
Yes, actually, I have some comments / questions to Carrie. So I think it's going to increase the percentage of the truck route on that segment of Oakwood. Even though there are regulations for the percentage of the truck route, it's not being followed at all. There is no accountability. The trucks from different companies within that industrial park or not are using Oakwood Road for whatever destination they're going to, but mainly it is for the industrial park. So again, I just want to reiterate that we are increasing that percentage depending on the type of tenant that's going to be taking place in that area. So another TIA, if the TIA shows that the percentage exceeds that road, then what?
Well, the TIA says that after this conditional use permit, if it allows for a distribution or freight yard, freight terminal, transshipment depot facility, that would be reaching the limits that were established by the TIA. So anything beyond this, a future consideration within the park for a similar type use, that would require a new TIA. It would require infrastructure upgrades based on that TIA. We are aware of concerns regarding truck traffic on Oakwood, And we do have requirements in other conditional use permits that we have issued for Oakview Business Park for truck routes to be established. We do have something in the FedEx facility, but again, that's something that's not part of this application.
So I guess maybe I'm not understanding. So a future or another TIA would be required for that due to the increase of the percentage of trucks on Oakwood Road, which is not a truck route and it's a local residential road. So,
Christine,
yes,
actually the TIA wouldn't just be for Oakwood. It would be the established route that would include all arterial stops and
correct.
Hull Avenue as well to Ryan.
Yes,
So not just Oakwood.
I know, but the addition, this is what's going to instigate the TIA.
This one wouldn't do it, but if they built on the corner to the east and proposed something similar, you know, that a logistics shipping company, that would trigger the new TIA. This one doesn't put it over the limit. A future one would, the next one in. Did I say that right, Carrie?
Yes. So with this building, that was reaching the limits of the TIA. With this proposal, any future considerations would trigger the need for a new TIA and upgrades to the park.
That's correct. If I might, Mayor, Doug Seymour, Director of Community Development. And I think that's the important notation. When the TIA was done for Oakview Business Park, I mean, it anticipated a certain level of logistics, the warehousing, distribution, things of that nature. And I think Matt probably could describe that in a little bit better detail. But I mean, as the park built out or is building out, it's just that those uses have come in quicker than some of the other more traditional manufacturing buildings, and that's fine. I mean, I think given our druthers, we all like to see a little bit more balance with manufacturing there, but that's, I mean, Oak Creek is set up very well for logistics. This is responding to a market demand. I mean, the one thing I would note is that, I mean, the building itself is not a conditional use. I mean, what could happen is that, and it has happened elsewhere, is you've had a building constructed and approved at a site that meets all of our requirements in our manufacturing zoning district. And in this case, within the PUD, it's just that the use within that building would necessitate that conditional use permit. And as an example, I mean, I often use this, I mean, pretty much every manufacturing company uses trucks, but there's a difference between that and a trucking company. I mean, this would be the trucking company. And there's examples all throughout the Oak Creek and even in this park of similar buildings that have these logistics types companies in them. That doesn't mean it's a FedEx. I mean, it's not set up for a FedEx. That's a cross-dock facility. It's really focusing on the warehousing. And honestly, regardless of whether there's a conditional use permit in place for this or not, you're still going to have the same amount of truck bays, truck doors, and potentially truck parking. So it's really, the types of businesses that potentially would go in there. It's not as much, I mean, the impact associated with the size of the building, because that's permitted. That's permitted in there. And as we move on to the review of the site plan, I mean, you'll see that there have been a number of things done with respect to the unique character of that site that would minimize the impact of that building. So, it's, I think the central point that we're trying to get out here is that, there are still land available in the park. And, should a proposal come forth for more logistics type users that would require a conditional use permit, we're going to take a very serious look at that in terms of what a future TIA would require for improvements, not only within the park, but also on the adjacent roadway network.
Thank you, Doug. Appreciate that. Christine, you still have the floor with questions or comments.
Regardless TIA or not, and I understand what Doug said, this establishment is being permitted. It has the permit to be industrial or logistics. however you want to call it, is just, I'm concerned, like the resident have said, it's going to increase traffic, and without proper control over that, it's just going to get out of hand. That's my concern, especially with a residential area with kids riding bikes and walking and all of that. So it's just a concern. That's all what I have.
Okay, understood. Thanks. Is that it? No?
Yeah, yes, that's it for me.
Okay. Matt?
There we go. Sorry about that. Button wasn't working. I think you guys covered the TIA pretty well. You know, it was basic and it was done, I believe in 2013, 2014. So it was a while back, and they did look at it in a, you know, whole business park aspect. What has occurred in my interpretation of the TIA versus the actual is the size of the buildings for warehousing, and the uses outside of the warehouse. So if this conditional use in site plan is approved tonight, basically it gets to the limit of where they had for warehousing in the TIA. But the light industrial and things like that just aren't quite there yet. But it does come to a point of maximizing the amount of square footage through the whole TIA. So you guys pretty much hit it right on the head as far as moving forward. It's our recommendation out of engineering that an additional TIA be done. So we would have a pretty good understanding of not only what this park would develop further as, and have some control over that maybe, but also infrastructure needs and requirements, not only interior, like Doug said, but exterior. And that would include, you know, maybe improvements to prohibit trucks moving more to, you know, to the west, that Maggie and Tom have indicated, which, you know, is a concern down that road. And it has been an issue. We have done a number of traffic studies. We've paid for video surveillance. We've tried to work with the police officers. So we've tried to do minimal money into it. We're trying to understand the problems, but I think in order to fix that, it's a substantial amount of dollars. And I think a TIA should be able to hopefully address some of that in the future. Outside of that, you know, it is permitted use like everyone has said. So I think we just have to move forward and look at this and look at the whole park as a whole in our decisions here.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Dawn?
Nothing for me.
Okay. Greg?
I'm just curious, that existing road that comes up to Oakwood that's next to this parcel, that's already being used for truck traffic to get out onto Oakwood?
Correct.
And is there a requirement that they turn right there and they're just going westbound, or is there no requirement?
You know, I'll let Matt answer that one if he has knowledge of it. I think there's signs there saying no left turn, but I can't say that for sure. Matt?
That was actually one of the implementations we did. We have no left turn for trucks at that location, and for trucks coming southbound out of the Opus to the north, we have no right turns for trucks. There are signs posted there, weight truck limits. So we've done things by signs. Clearly, a lot of people don't follow signs, and they don't, you know, have, I guess, any empathy towards the local residents. They're looking for the shortest and quickest route. So the only way I think you can truly address the situation is by more of a true infrastructure or hardscape type, you know, engineering or very, very heavy police enforcement until they get the message, and fines and things along those lines.
Okay. And so the fact that people aren't currently following the the signage and direction now, I would anticipate that the new tenant would not necessarily 100% follow those as well. So it would add traffic onto Oakwood, which is concerning. My other question, I guess, concern would be if another TIA is done and improvements are suggested, infrastructure upgrades or whatever the case may be, does that then fall on the city, or does that fall on the business park, or is that all part, would that all be part of a new development agreement?
It's, you want to go, Matt, or you want me to?
Yeah, I can
jump?
handle it.
Okay.
I'm sure there's a number of ways we can handle it, a number of ways it could be handled, I guess. My recommendation on engineering would be, clearly this is not a city cause, or, you know, caused by the city. So you could put it on each developer, you could put it on the entire development as a whole, or business park, because obviously everyone has a piece in the pie here. So, you know, you could do an entire assessment. There could be a development agreement. There's a number of avenues that could be explored. And I'm sure Doug might be able to speak a little bit better on this, but my interpretation would be that it would probably be handled through development agreements. It could be part of some conditional uses as we move forward, I believe. But I think Doug would be able to speak on the conditional use a little better in the future.
Thanks, Matt. I think there's a couple of questions here. I mean, there's obviously some concerns about existing truck traffic exiting the park, and again, irrespective of the signs that are out there, ignoring those rules, and I think that's a combination of, you know, persistent enforcement, and I think that we've, you know, worked with the police department to do that to varying degrees of success, and that's going to be the case whether there's a conditional use permit for a transshipment depot on this parcel, or whether it's just a manufacturing property, because manufacturing properties have trucks. So, I mean, while there's a legitimate concern there about what traffic from the park is doing, you know, as it relates to the posted traffic signage there, I mean, I just want to make sure that we're not confusing that with the issue at hand with the conditional use permit. And honestly, and Matt's correct, I mean, if there is a physical solution, a design solution that would make it harder for those trucks to turn left out of that park without compromising the safety of that intersection, I think you can do that today. And if that's something that you want to have engineering explore in conjunction with the approval of the site plan, I think that the plan commission is certainly able to do that. Certainly, I mean, if there ever were to be requests for additional conditional use permits, that would be one of the things that we'd be looking at in the TIA. I mean, I'd not be adverse at this point in time. And Matt, I don't know if you just have any back of the envelope things that, I mean, you could suggest that might, you know, might function well at that intersection. But I mean, you're not precluded from requiring improvements, offsite improvements, as part of this conditional use permit. I think that's totally legitimate if you can make the case that the impact of the conditional use is necessitating that improvement, that offset improvement to the intersection. So whether it's now, whether it's with the next conditional use permit, if there is a request, I think it's perfectly legitimate for the city to look to the developers of those lots within the park to address the impact that they're creating on the infrastructure network.
Okay, thank you for that. And I mean, I would agree, and I would definitely, I guess, push for the engineering to look into that, or whoever needs to look into it in conjunction with this conditional use permit. I guess one positive would, with the TIA, I know it's happened in other areas of the city where there was a traffic issue or some infrastructure issues, and the TIA that came with other developments identified that, and it allowed for improvements or pushed for improvements in those other areas. So I know there could be a positive in conjunction with that as well. But definitely anything that could be done in conjunction with this conditional use permit, I would support. So thank you. That's all for now.
Okay, thanks, Greg. Chris?
No, Alderman Lorik actually asked the last questions I had, so I'm good here. Thank you.
Okay. Don?
It is zoned for manufacturing, and I think we know that if any manufacturing goes there, there's going to be truck traffic. Just kind of goes with the territory. I'm behind any extra measures it would take to make sure these trucks, traffic, whatever it may be, go to the east and not the west, across in front of houses. I have no doubt that the intentions of the tenants are to be good neighbors. However, let's be honest, once the trucks are off their property, they have little to no control of what happens, except for trying to, enforce with their tenants the proper protocol of their trucks. As it is manufacturing, it's hard not to prove this with, the conditions being met, but I am behind 100% doing whatever it would take to ensure that the traffic is limited going in front of these residential buildings on Oakwood. That's all I gotta say.
Okay, Don, thanks. We'll continue. We do have a resident that wants to re-speak, but we'll finish up with the commissioners first. Fred?
I think all the commissioners have answered a lot of the questions or asked the questions and they've been answered. Again, I'm in agreement with the truck traffic problem. And I really think we need to concentrate on controlling the traffic going west.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Fred. Chauncey?
I do have a question for the applicant in regards to the truck traffic. So what would be your recommendations on how to handle the flow of traffic such that it doesn't impact the residents?
I don't know if they're going to be able to answer that. I think Don kind of said it once they leave the facility. If it's, a truck dropping material, if it's not solely owned by the company like a FedEx, it becomes difficult once it's off the property. I think I would agree with maybe Matt. It becomes a physical engineering piece to try to deter that going west. Sam?
Right. Hi, this is Sam Dickman, 626 East Wisconsin Avenue. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
I have two comments. The first is it may be easier to make that turn or make the entrance a right turn only from an exit to the park so that cars and trucks have to turn towards Howell Avenue. Nobody can go left down Oakwood Road. That most of that traffic's truck traffic anyways, and then no one physically could be turning left. There would be just it would just shuttle you into a right turn lane. But in regards to the physical changes on that corner, we would ask that it's an entire park cost or work with the city on it, not just on this development, because it's a whole park causing traffic issues, not just this particular building. And it would become prohibitive for us to pay for all the changes at the entrance just based on this one development.
I think that's a fair thought.
Okay, and then my next question, this would be either for Carrie or Doug. So if the traffic is excessive or is not in compliance, and you all may have addressed this, how is that handled? Because it sounds like it is impacting the residents as it exists today, and more truck traffic may cause this scenario to be worse than better.
And I can certainly welcome any of Carrie's thoughts on this. But I mean, ultimately, it is a matter of enforcement. And I know that the police department has made several efforts to enforce that. And I know that there was some documentation, and Matt spoke of with respect to, I know what the true extent of the problem is there. But again, from the Plan Commission's perspective, if there is, and this is the case with any conditional use permit, if there is evidence that a property owner is not complying with the terms of the conditional use permit, and that's a very tough hurdle to clear. I mean, there are ultimately steps that one can take to revoke conditional uses, and that's a process that we hope we never have to use, and we're always wanting to work with the companies to do that. Again, that's in this case in particular, it'd be hard to make that case for something that's not within their control. So, I mean, I think we'd be happy to take a look at some design solutions that minimize that or eliminate that turning movement. But I mean, practically, it's still going to be enforcement.
Okay, thank you. And then my final question for the applicant, were there other properties that had less residential area or residents in the area evaluated?
All right, Sam, you should be able to unmute yourself and speak.
Okay now?
Yep.
Okay. We were looking for other properties in the area, particularly in the park. The only site large enough to accommodate the size building we wanted to put on was this one. The park has been very successful in the sense that most of the lots have been sold and have been developed. And so in today's business age, as far as industrial real estate, we have to have a site large enough to get economies of scale and spread out costs in order to be competitive in the marketplace as far as rents. And so while we did look at other sites and we built on other sites, this was the only one remaining within the park that could accommodate a building of this size, except for the piece to the east, which the city is holding out for a corporate headquarters.
Thank you.
Okay. I know Maggie had her raise hand function. She wanted to speak one more time. So Kevin, if you'd allow her on, please.
Maggie, you should be able to speak. You'll just have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, okay. Tom had the question, actually, Mayor.
Oh, that's okay. Hi, Tom.
Hi. I have sent in the last year and a half 3 reports to the police department about the trucks I count. And these are just what I notice when I'm in a certain room of my house watching TV or out in my yard. So the true number is a lot higher, but the most recent report said that in 13 weeks, there were 51 illegal semis going past my house. Most of them actually come from the west. So these people would have a hard time turning into the park if the infrastructure improvements to restrict outgoing traffic happened, or maybe they would just happen in one lane. There were 51 total trucks, and 8 of them were westbound.
So actually, yeah, understood.
I would say maybe the true number is not is 2 or 3 times 51 if that were somehow monitored 24 hours a day.
Yes.
That would just be my guess.
Yeah. And yeah.
Okay, I have a question though too, since Mr. Dickman brought it up. Would the city consider releasing that land for something like this rather than and have a corporate headquarters on this part? Because that would certainly be a better neighbor to us than a truck deal.
You know, Maggie, from a standpoint of the city, the large partial, there's not enough acreage there for a corporate headquarters on what's being proposed on the conditional use permit at the 10303 South Oakwood that we're looking at, whereas the corner actually provides that not only maximum exposure, but has the acreage to accommodate
Yeah.
that large headquarters that we desire.
One other question I have is is there a way to reconfigure this? I mean, obviously it's industrial, it's allowed. Is there a way to reconfigure it so that only exposed toward the road, toward Oakwood would be building and not parking lot or truck terminal kind of stuff? Is there a way to shift
I can't answer that, but just kind of given, I think that's wetlands.
No, it's not.
No, there, if you look at the drawing, I don't know. I don't know how the building would sit, if it would impact that blue ridge on the left-hand side and on the northern side.
Mayor, no, that's not. And I think as we enter into the discussion about the site plan, you'll see that there are some things that were done and still can be done to really minimize that impact upon Oakwood Road and the properties that are adjacent to that. And I think, as we move into that discussion, you'll see that, I mean, things have been done with this site that have been sensitive to those concerns, but I mean, let's focus on the conditional use permit right now.
Yeah, no, good point. But again, it's, we talk about enforcement, and Tom, you bring up a good point. We've talked multiple times to Chief Anderson about this, Captain Stecker. It is very difficult because we just don't have enough officers to sit there enough and deter it the way it should be. And Tom, you bring up a really interesting point that most of this traffic's coming from the west. So it kind of leads to believe that most of it's coming from the west and not the park. Maybe they're trying to reach the park, but air gas is located up there, and they could be coming from as far as 27th down. No telling where they're coming from. Maybe it is the physical design of the intersection to deter anything going west. I definitely would support that. All the same, I do agree with the applicant. I think it'd be unfair to put the burden on this one property, and there's multiple places out there that have trucking. One of the commissioners made the point, it is manufacturing. You're going to have trucks, and I think Doug pointed to that either way. But definitely, if we can be sensitive to the impact of the neighborhood, I'd almost support that without a doubt. As far as the conditional use permit goes, it's not to say it couldn't be a more passive manufacturing type facility all the same, or a warehouse storage facility or something that may not generate as much truck traffic as what we fear of being a truck terminal, as Doug described the difference. So I would support the conditional use permit, and then work harder to protect the neighborhood in other ways with the plans, with the landscape and the whole thing going forward. So I hope I kind of answered your questions. I know they're not great answers, but it has been our experience. And again, that lot to the east, I kind of touched on that. It really would, if somebody came in there, I would agree with Matt from our engineering department. The city would put that onus on the next developer to help correct those issues if they wanted it bad enough. The park has been highly successful and filled up very quickly. This is one of the last parcels, as Mr. Dickman described, and it fits the use. So are there any other questions, comments?
Mr. Mayor, I have
Yes.
one.
Go ahead, Chris.
Everyone's kind of been alluding to the TIA, and I know that that's the next step for the next tenant. Is there anything we can put into this to help us have the intersection and traffic going west reviewed before everything starts going into motion, so that at least the neighbors know that we're working towards something. I know it's going to be the next developer, but it shouldn't probably wait until the next developer is my thought. That's the only thing. I don't want to hang it up. I'm just trying to get it out there.
Alderman Guzikowski, this is Carrie. One of the things that we had discussed about incorporating into the conditions and restrictions is mentioning the need for a TIA following this use. And we do need to make sure that we have that carried over into other reviews and approvals as well. But there would be mention in the conditions and restrictions. And based on the conversation tonight, I think the conditions and restrictions are likely to include things to address the truck traffic issues that have been brought up.
Thank you. I'm satisfied. Thank you.
But is it tied to this property or is it tied to the park?
Mr. Mayor, that is a great question. And I think that what we want to make sure is clear to everyone and put everyone on notice for is the requirement should this be approved moving forward, and that while it would be mentioned in the conditional use permit, it would also be mentioned in any other reviews and approvals throughout the park. Just to put everybody on notice, there have been many discussions regarding the use and uses in the park moving forward, the requirements for the TIA and the infrastructure upgrades. I think there are quite a few people who are aware of this requirement now, but it doesn't preclude those other agreements or approvals incorporating that same language.
And I think that's fair, and those are all really good points. I also want to bring to the commission's attention that, I mean, this is a conditional use permit. If there are impacts associated with this conditional use that affect the park, affect the neighborhood, you are within the purview of this plan commission, this council, this city, to attach them to the conditional use permit. And I just want to, in all fairness, remind people that of the other conditional use permits that have been granted for warehouse and transshipment facilities within the park, several of them are owned by the same company. I think with the exception of one. Now, granted, there's always going to be your manufacturing tenants like Stella and Chewy's that are, don't have those conditional use permits, but I think that sure, I mean, there's an impact that extends beyond this one property, but the multiple conditional use permits for these types of uses are for the Dickman company. And, I don't know how that translates into the pro formas for each one of those sites, but I think that shouldn't preclude us as a city from seeking design solutions to impacts that currently exist within the park.
Okay. So again, if whatever language would be crafted and put on this conditional use permit, whose responsibility is it to do this study to come up with an answer? I'm a little confused by that.
Well, I think we certainly want to work with, I mean, it's a matter of, it's the intersection, whether it's what can be done at the intersection. And I don't know, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a designer, I can't tell you what it might cost to make that left turn movement less convenient for trucks. But I think that it shouldn't take a whole lot to figure that out. And I don't want to let this fall on our engineering department because Lord knows they have enough to do. But I think that given the number of conditional use permits for these types of uses within the park, I think that we can get some idea of what those improvements might be. And I can't give you a definitive answer, Mayor, and I'm sorry for that. But
no, I understand, Doug. I just hate the craft language on the fly.
We'll come back with something on the conditional use and the conditions and restrictions for next time.
Okay. And I guess just one last question. Geez, I really hate to, just keep dragging it out. But Matt, Mr. Tom Mueller kind of did his own little survey, and he would know best. He kind of lives there. Did you find in your study, was there a way to, and I'm sure there's a way to do it, was most of the traffic coming from the west and not the park?
I'd have to review that. I'd have to review that with our staff. I'm not 100%. I didn't review it prior to the meeting, but we actually had video detection for 2 or 3 days.
Okay.
Now that's not going to give a full week like Tom has. They obviously clearly have a better understanding when they're there for 7 days a week, and
Yes.
in 24 hours. We do have counters, but they do collect that type of data. Granted, the weather has turned on us, so we can't put that out there, but we can get an idea which direction they're going. But honestly, listening to what Tom said, I'm wondering if he probably is 100% right on that. When guys come off the interstate, they're going to take the shortest route, and that shortest route might be taking them down 13th Street and then Oakwood over. Or when they're coming from the south, they might be coming off a 7 mile up to 13th and over. So, it's very, very likely that that's what's really happening. And I don't know how you address that,
Yeah. I don't know if we need stronger signage, up at the intersection of 13th and Oakwood. And again, I know signs don't always correct behavior. But I think that would be interesting because, Tom's the first one that's really brought up that point. We just always assumed everything fell in the park.
Yeah,
And
Dan,
that the people in the park were doing wrong. Yes.
Matt kind of stole my thunder. Mr. Miller talked about the traffic coming from the west. This is just an opinion, but any truck traffic leaving has to get there first. And whether they're coming from the north or the south, I guarantee they're coming down 13th Street. I drive on the interstate every day. There is a ridiculous amount of truck traffic. There's truck driver shortages, which means the turnover is ridiculous with truck drivers. So you're getting a lot of inexperienced truck drivers, and most of them are just using Google on their phones, just like you and I would. And we all know it shows the shortest route. Coming from the north, like Matt said, you're either getting off on, coming from north, you're getting off on Ryan Road. Coming from the south, you're probably going to get off on 7 Mile. And that's going to take you to 13th Street, and that's going to take you to Oakwood almost every time, unless there's weather or an accident. It's going to be almost every time. They're going to take them down and coming from the west. Like I said, I have no proof of this. It's just logic, Google Maps. It'll take you that way every time. So that kind of puts the onus on whether it's the city to do something about directing traffic coming off 7 Mile Road, not to keep going all the way to Oakwood, somehow get them around. But I have no doubt that Mr. Miller is probably correct on his numbers. They're probably all coming from the west, every one of them. Just please keep that in mind when, we're looking for solutions.
Okay. Thank you all. Okay, are we ready to consider conditional use permit for 6B? How about a motion?
Guzekowski makes a motion that the Plan Commission recommends that the Common Council approves a conditional use permit for a freight yard, freight terminal, transshipment depot facilities within the multi-tenant building on the property at 10303 South Oakview Parkway after a public hearing and subject to conditions and restrictions that will be prepared for the Plan Commission's review at the next meeting, December 8th.
Seibert seconds.
Roll call?
Anna, aye.
Sullivan, aye.
Grillo, aye.
Lorik, aye.
Kavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Donnie, aye.
Seibert, aye.
Chandler, no.
Okay. That leads us to 6C, and as Carrie said, this is a plan review of the building site landscape and related plans on the building we just talked about for the Dickman Company on the property at 10303 South Oakview Parkway. Carrie?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So now we are going to move into the actual site and building plan review for the property that we were just discussing. Again, this is in Oakview Business Park at the entrance to that park on the north. The proposal is for a roughly 157,000 square foot multi-tenant building. And again, up to 4 tenants can be accommodated in that building, although there is nothing saying that a single user couldn't occupy it. This is the proposed site plan showing where that parking is, where the building is oriented. Setbacks, dimensional requirements appear to be met in those plans for the building and for the parking lot. Access would be on South Oakview Parkway. There's no direct access to Oakwood Road. You will note that the docks are oriented on the west side of the building. There are 2 screen walls for the docks. There's one, if you can see my cursor, right here on the north side. Then there's an even longer one here on the south side. 110 employee and visitor parking stalls, as we mentioned in the previous item, are on the east. All of the truck parking would be on the west. There's parking that has been identified and then future parking stalls as well. 28 depressed docks and 4 at-grade docks. Those will also be screened by the walls. And as we will move into this, we will also see what the landscaping incorporates for that dock area. Minimum parking requirements, if we move into that. Warehousing operations require 1 stall for every 5,000 square feet, plus 1 stall for every peak shift employee. And general manufacturing, processing, and fabrication requires 1 stall for every employee. So as we mentioned in the previous review item, they are anticipating about 80 employees for any shift, and that could be 24/7 operations. So you could have up to 80 employees that they're anticipating on site at any one time. And although the operations are anticipated to be between 6 a.m. and 7 p.m. right now, that of course will change based on tenant needs. Based on this information alone, 111 parking stalls will be required. They are providing 110, so it looks like they're just 1 short. However, they do show potential future parking areas on the west for vehicles and trucks. The vehicle area would be on an as-needed basis, so that's not actually shown on this particular site plan. We did see something that could be accommodated if it were necessary, but staff has no objection to the parking stalls as proposed. Should the Plan Commission feel that the same, there is language in code that allows for the Plan Commission to make those modification adjustments. Moving into the landscape plan now, we're going to go from north to south. So if we stay on the north here, there are 2 berms that we're going to be discussing. There is a berm that extends along Oakwood Road, along that frontage. This berm is approximate, it kind of ranges. So if you're at Oakwood Road and you're looking south, the top of the berm is between 9 inches lower than the road to 2.5 feet higher. And the vegetation that's proposed to be on top of the berm incorporates a number of deciduous trees and also 6-foot tall evergreens. So what staff is recommending for both of the berms, and the berm along the west side we'll discuss in a moment, we're recommending that the top of the berm be no shorter than 4 feet as measured from the road, and that the berm incorporates more evergreens to ensure adequate screening from the road. Now, if we move into the southern portion and along the west, that berm is between 2 feet higher to 4.3 feet higher than the road when measured at the residence that's along the west side there. So again, staff is recommending that the berm be no shorter than 4 feet as measured from the adjacent residence grade. Screening along the east side for the proposed parking stalls appear to be in compliance with code. There may be some slight variations that would be required. We do need to incorporate those heights of the plants at installation and maturity to ensure adequate screening, those details need to be in revised plans that were included in the conditions and for this, the conditions of approval that were recommended for Plan Commission consideration. Now, when we talk about the berms, the reason that staff is recommending the height and the screening plants that we are is to ensure that there is adequate screening to those residences in the area. We do also recommend, as was included in the staff report, that the landscape plans be updated to include the canopy cover at installation to give a more true version of what will be installed. And also, as previously mentioned, the additional evergreens and the heights for all of the plants would have to be in the revised landscape plans. Moving on to the building now. The elevations that we're going to be discussing are moving north, east, south, and then west. The primary building material is painted insulated precast concrete panels for the entirety of the building. There are several window clusters that will be identified in the elevations as we move forward. There's the 13-foot tall screen wall for the docks that we also mentioned. And I failed to mention earlier that dumpster enclosures are actually behind these screen walls and in the loading dock areas. There are no other locations that were presented. These panels are in 3 different colors, and the wood look panels are incorporated throughout the building on the north, the east, and the south elevations, providing some variation to the building itself, in addition to the projections and recesses and parapets that we are seeing. There are also metal canopies that are over some of these decorative elements, as well as the entries and the windows. The windows incorporate spandrel and vision glass. They're kind of scattered throughout there for each of the window clusters. Gives a little bit of variation there and provides for both regular windows and just for decoration. And again, on the south side, showing that 13-foot tall screen wall for the south dock area. Rooftop mechanical units are included as a requirement to be behind the parapets in these proposed elevations. Any ground mechanical units or utilities or transformer boxes, anything like that would have to be adequately screened. When those are sited, they would have to be incorporated into the landscaping plans and submitted for our department's review in order to ensure adequate screening. The west is entirely dock areas. You will see some transom windows that are above the docks in various locations. Again, there's a dumpster enclosure on the north, and then there's a dumpster enclosure on the south. And that's what the trash enclosures are proposed to look like. They will have precast concrete panels to match the building with metal gates. There was a master sign plan that was presented as part of the submittal. However, there are some details that are missing. So basically what we have are locations and maximum sizes for these particular signs. However, we do need to have some additional details that would require a more in-depth master sign plan review, and the applicant is aware of that. So that would be brought back to the Plan Commission for review at a later date. However, having said that, the monument sign that is presented does meet the size and locational requirements, setback requirements for code, as long as those footings and the foundation for the sign itself remain outside of the easement area. And on the screen right now are the perspectives that were presented as part of this package. And this is a view from the southeast, showing the east elevation of the building. At the entry for the vehicle parking lot. And another perspective. There is a suggested motion on the screen. I should mention one other thing. It is included in the conditions, the recommended conditions, and that's for light fixtures. We didn't include the photometrics as part of this presentation, but they were included as part of the Plan Commission packets. In order to be sensitive to the residences in the area, we are requiring that all fixtures be shielded and directed downward as we normally would. The applicant did include the recommendation for the maximum color temperature to be 35,000 Kelvin. So thank you for amending those plans to include that. Also, we are requiring that those fixtures that are adjacent to the residences be shielded on the side that is adjacent to the residence to provide additional shielding of the lights. So again, that is incorporated into the conditions that are included as the suggested motion for Plan Commission consideration. Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Carrie. Before we go to commission, would Sam Dickman or would the applicant like to say a few words? And is there anybody out there, Kevin, wishing to comment?
We had Domenico raise his hand to speak. He is the architect.
Okay.
All right. Domenico, you should be able to speak. We'll need your name, address, and company for the record.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
My name is Dominic Ferrante. I am with Brian. My address is 3885 North Brookfield Road, Brookfield, Wisconsin. Basically wanted to put forth, Carrie kind of gave a very good description of the project and addressed most of the items that were needed to be addressed and put out there. I'm available for any questions that the commission may have.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else, Kevin, or are we ready for the commission?
We have the neighbor Maggie raise her hand.
Okay, put Maggie on.
All right, Maggie, you should be able to speak.
Thank you. I'm really happy to hear about the lighting because that was one question I had. And also I'm happy that you're raising that berm up. I'm not quite sure 4 feet is enough. I know English Air got a pretty good bump on their earth berm that's between them and Amazon. There's got to be some kind of compromise in between what you're proposing and that. I don't know how many feet theirs is, but it's enough so that they don't even see it from where they're when they're in their backyards. But definitely the trees would help as well. One other thing that I got to throw out there, and this would help the residents a lot, and that is if you'd extend that sidewalk that's already started coming from Howell, going west on Oakwood. It stops right at the entrance to the park, and then it didn't continue past that intersection. If they could extend that along there, even if it's like a bike path kind of stuff instead of a full sidewalk, that would help us a lot in trying to get to that bike path and do the recreating that a lot of people have been doing a lot of during this COVID. Right now, you just got to kind of hug the edge of the road all the way up there. But even that little bit would help a lot, I think, to keep that sense that we're a residential area. That's the part that I just hate losing here. And this landscaping plan definitely will help us retain some of that. Tom also has some comments on this. That's okay.
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Tom.
I had a question. Carrie mentioned the screening wall by the dock.
On the north side?
On our end and on the south side.
Yeah.
How long is that wall and how tall is it?
I know the south is a little longer than the north. I'll let Carrie answer that.
The height of both of the screen walls is 13 feet. The wall on the south is, as the mayor mentioned, longer than the one on the north. I would have to defer to the applicant's representative for the exact length of each of those.
That seems longer than the wall at AIM Pilot. Is that right? There's kind of a stubby wall that comes out there, and I'm not good on guessing at how long it is.
Boy, I couldn't tell you, Tom. Anybody got any knowledge of that?
In pilot, it's about
Yeah.
much.
I don't recall the heights or the lengths of any of the screen walls that are in similar buildings in Oakview Business Park, but they are similar. I think there was one building that had 2 walls. One was detached from the building to screen additional parking areas for the trucks, but that's kind of a different situation than what we're talking about here. So again, I would defer to the applicant's representative for those details.
Yeah, just anecdotally, I think that, the ones that are existing in the park, to my recollection, kind of take a 1 truck length from the building. I suspect that this is quite a bit more than that. And if you look at the site plan that was presented, I think that you can actually see that. I think it covers pretty much the entirety of that of the truck loading area. I think it stops. It doesn't go all the way out, obviously all the way to the end of the parking lot, but it does cover quite a bit of that. You can kind of see that white area that on the west end of the building. I believe that to be the kind of the truck parking and loading area. You can see that dark line there extends past that. So I think that's actually quite a bit more than what we've seen at some of the other conditional use permits in the park.
That would be good. I'd say the more of that parking lot you can cover up, the better. Because if you stood at my driveway, you'd see a berm. Maybe the berm should be taller. You see the pine trees and other trees. That's good. Hopefully they're large when they're planted. Because some of the ones by FedEx down Oakwood Road are like 2 feet high at present, a year and a half later. And if that wall is there, that's 3 good steps here to protect us a little.
This is Carrie. Yeah, just to clarify, I apologize if it wasn't clear earlier, but those evergreen plantings that are on the berm are proposed to be installed at a minimum height of 6 feet.
Wonderful. Okay.
Holy cow.
Should do it.
Okay, is that it, Tom, Maggie, for now?
I guess, yeah, I guess so.
Okay, we'll move on to the commission.
Mr. Mayor, before you move on, there's another neighbor, Rob, that wishes to speak as well.
Oh, fine. Sorry about that. Put him on, please.
Rob will need your name and address for the record, and then you should be able to unmute yourself. Rob, you have to unmute yourself in the Zoom controls.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. So my name is Rob Malechko. I'm at 431 West Oakwood Road. And my property, if you're looking at the proposed site plan, upper left corner, that's my house next to, let's see. Yes, just the first driveway west of the proposed property on the south side.
You're right on top of it then.
I am right on top of it, yes. So one of the points that I wanted to make was I can't stress strongly enough the importance of the berming and the landscaping, that's being proposed. I'm actually pleasantly surprised with what is being proposed. There is about 150 feet from my property line before the berming starts. And Maggie earlier mentioned about the height of the berm, that it would, it was mentioned that it would be a minimum of 4 feet. Is that correct?
That is what staff is suggesting, if I'm correct. On the north side, it was 4 foot, but then the trees would be a minimum 6 foot. So realistically, it's a 10-foot barrier.
Sure.
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
Mayor, that is correct. Staff is recommending that the berm be no shorter than 4 feet as measured from the adjacent property's grade on the west, and no shorter than 4 feet as measured at the same grade as the road on the north, with minimum evergreen plantings installed at a minimum height of 6 feet.
Okay. Okay. So since there's a minimum, silly question, is there a maximum height that is allowable?
I think it depends on the tree and how high it wants to grow. I can't answer that one.
No, I'm talking about the berm itself, the physical berm, not necessarily the plantings.
I'm not an engineer, but you start getting into stormwater management with the height of the berm, and maybe Matt could address that a little bit for us. There, given the width of the land, the higher you go with the berm, the wider it gets, and things like that. But Matt, anything you can help with?
I'm having issues with my buttons. Mayor, it's not stormwater, it's more coverage of the area. So yeah, you're correct. And the higher you get, the closer you're going to get to adjacent properties. So, I guess, Rob, I'm not sure what you're getting at. If you want a maximum so it doesn't get any closer.
Yeah, I mean, because all the truck bays, the semis will all be on the west side of the building, which is the side that I would see. So for me, the taller the screening, the better, obviously, as opposed to, simply meeting the minimum, berm height requirements. I would, like Maggie mentioned earlier, that maybe somewhere in between the minimum and what could be perceived as a reasonable maximum height. I think that would be, certainly very important for me and my property. And I wanted to mention one other thing. As you look at the landscape plan and compare that to what is directly across the street in front of Yaskawa, the proposed landscape here, to me, looks more substantial than what Yaskawa has. So by comparison, can anybody maybe verify that yes, what is being proposed is actually more than what you see right across the street?
I would just say visually from what I see on a print and having just driven by there, I would say it's substantially more around this place.
Okay, that was my impression as well.
Yeah. But again, it's just my opinion. I wouldn't state
Sure.
that correct.
Sure, and I would add one last thing. Earlier, you were talking about the truck traffic.
Yes.
I can certainly attest to the fact that the majority of the trucks do come from the west. And you can actually hear them rumbling down the road before you actually see them. And the other thing that I'll mention is that when those trucks come off of 13th Street, by the time they are getting on the other side of the railroad tracks, between the railroad tracks and Howell, they aren't even going close to 25 miles an hour. So that's the other caveat about the semis that are coming down Howell. Way too many and way too fast.
Okay, thanks, Rob. You know, we'll have engineering. Matt does has the old study out. We'll take a look at that. We'll see. I'm sure you guys are 100% correct. I just find it very interesting that they're slipping in from the west, and well, you know, that's
Sure,
a whole
and-
nother issue to address.
Yeah, you talked about potentially a right turn only out of the business park, but you'd have to do a no right turn into the business park from the west, which obviously.
And then they would just drive by it and
Yes,
get on the
exactly.
Howell and be a mess there. So.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you for your time.
Okay, Rob, thanks.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else, Kevin? Or are we ready to go to commission?
That is it.
Okay, before we go to commission, Tom had asked a question of the length of the north wall. That's 73 feet in length. I checked the architectural drawings. And just for reference, the south wall is 108. And those are 13-foot high, as Carrie stated. So with that, we'll go to the commission. I forget which way we're going first. I think Christine, can you start us off?
Sure, I have no comments. Thank you.
Okay. Matt.
I guess I just have a few comments in regards to those berms. I just want to reiterate, you know, what everyone's been talking about as far as trying to maximize their heights. One of the concerns and the issues that the civil designers are going to have here, especially on the north side, is if we continue to increase that berm greater than 4 feet or 5 or 6 feet, whatever it may be, you do have a number of utilities that run along Howell. I mean, not Howell, but Oakwood. And there's a drainage ditch along there. So there have to be some considerations to make sure that we don't impact those negatively as that berm increases. So there'll be, you know, just by the natural lay of the land and what's out there, there will be some, you know, things that would stop us from increasing heights. But, you know, we'll try to get to 4 feet, as Carrie has mentioned. And then, you know, my suggestion would be try to maximize that without creating the negative impact. Obviously, the one on the west side, you have a little more play as far as increasing that height, if that's what the commission would, you know, so choose to try to maximize that height and keep a certain distance away while not negatively impacting any drainage or utilities along those sides. So outside of that, I think I agree with a lot of people on the look of the building. This is much improved compared to what we've seen built in the park. Even the ones that go along Howell, this is a much better looking building, and the landscaping is much more extensive. So we appreciate that developer on that. I think they've done a good job in trying to, you know, balance cost and benefit and looks and everything like that. So other than that, engineering has no other comments.
Okay, thank you. Dawn?
No comments.
Greg?
No questions. I'd just like to thank the staff for advocating for higher berms and a little more screening where they can to help out the neighbors a little bit. So thank you for that. No other questions though. Thank you.
Thanks. Chris?
No, I think it's a good looking building project. I think too that I appreciate the applicant working here to make sure they're sensitive here. They've built other buildings here, so they're definitely sensitive to, you know, what's going on in this area. So I appreciate that, and I appreciate also the neighbors, Rob and Maggie and Tom bringing up their concerns tonight. Now, you know, the onus is on us. We need to also look for solutions, you know, for Oakwood Road, and I know, Mayor, like you know, we get countless emails about it, so we need to figure out how we can help out, alleviate some of the issues here. But this project, I concur, looks really nice.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Good comments. Gets me to Don.
No questions really. It is nice to see that a landscape plan. It seems like we've been asking for it to come back a lot lately. I think, for more or different, and it is, it's pretty robust. So I guess I appreciate that. That's it. I don't have anything else.
Okay. Fred?
I like the building. I think they've done a fine job with it. And the idea of concentrating on the berms for the north and the west side, I think are very important. But I have one other question about lighting, the height of the lighting that they have for that facility. Is it 13 feet, 20 feet? How high is the lighting, especially in the west end?
Are you talking on the building, Fred, or on the poles?
On the poles.
Let me see if I can get to the electrical real quick and get you a height. Unless the architect knows.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
it appears that they are 20-foot poles on a 2-foot base.
22. Fred.
Okay. Will that create a problem for the people on the west side with that height?
We do have the shading. Carrie brought up the shading to the residential properties. So of course, anything to the west and north would definitely be shaded. I can't speak about anything on the east or south.
Okay, I just was curious. Thank you.
Oh, okay. Chauncey?
I do have a question for the applicant in regards to the truck traffic flow. I noticed on one of the renderings, there were parked cars. I believe that was the front of the building. Is that specifically for the employees or for visitors to the building or customers?
I would assume yes. You wouldn't want the pedestrians in the back if they are loading docks or anything of that nature. Could be employee parking in the back as well, but I would think with the semis, you'd want to eliminate car traffic back there. But if the applicant is with us, or
Yes, I'm here.
Yep. If I'm wrong, please correct me.
No, it's the east side is intended for employees and patrons.
Okay. And with the employees that work there, can you provide a little more information on just the safety, pedestrian safety while they're walking across the lot with the large trucks that are coming by?
There would be no trucks coming by in the parking lot. That's strictly for car parking.
Okay,
So it's segregated.
got it. And then also, can you provide more information in regards to the signs that would be on the building?
We did it as a overall size and generic, but we'll come back with a sign contractor with more specifics. But we identified the maximum size, the location, the height, and we were pretty detailed with the monument sign. But we can come back with more specifics. The actual what the sign will be generic at this point because we don't have a specific tenant. And then as specific tenants come up, then we'll deal with whatever that tenant would be. They would come in with their proposal for their specific sign. But the locations are identified, the overall size is identified, and the height is identified, and the square footages of the sign that are indicated are within the guidelines in the sign ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Very quickly, I'll just add, very well said, commissioners. I agree. It's a nice looking building. I'm really impressed with the landscape. It was really beefed up. Whether, that was through the staff and partnership with the applicant, it's much appreciated. I tried to answer as many questions as I could along the way with the length of the wall, the height. Carrie got the berm. We had extensive talks about that. Maggie brought up the sidewalk, and I'm really apologize. I'm unfamiliar with the site. There's a sidewalk. Is that on the south side of Oakwood, north side of Oakwood? For some reason, why am I picturing it on the north side? Or am I mistaken? Can anybody educate me, the sidewalk we're speaking about to extend, possibly?
Mayor, Matt Sullivan.
Yeah.
The sidewalk actually is from Howell Avenue to Oakview Parkway on the south side of Oakwood.
Okay.
What Maggie's talking about is trying to get that through the intersection and continue along Oakwood, at least through this property.
Up the Rob's
south
property?
side. Yeah, on the south side, to provide them with some walking space, at least. From what I understood, what Maggie was talking about, that there are some logistics there, as far as fitting it with an increase in the berm, the drainage. You know, maybe this is something more where we discuss in the future of widening Oakwood a little bit to get more of a paved shoulder that we've done on other roads where we've allowed or tried to accommodate bikes and things along the shoulders. This is something that we would have to look at further. I don't know if this would be appropriate to put onto the site here. It should have been part of the development, in all honesty, if that's what we were looking to do.
Okay. Thank you for that information, Matt. And again, boy, I really don't want to open up a can of worms here. But Matt brings up a good point. Maybe not anytime soon, but in our lifetime, you may see Oakwood Road be changed. And it could reflect something that went on at Drexel that you see between the interstate and 27th possibly. You know, it could get widened. And when we do that, we usually put in multi-purpose paths, as Matt alluded to. Maybe, you know, there's no immediate plans, so please don't email and freak out and everything. But that'd probably be the appropriate time to tackle that. I kind of agree with Matt. Some complications there, along with the ditches and everything else. So I do think it's a nice looking building. Appreciate all the work that went into it. I do support the bigger berms, everything that goes into it. Boy, I don't have a lot. You commissioners covered it very well. Chief Havey, is there anything from fire? I know you sit through these all the time. Is there anything we missed from a protective service standpoint? You know, the entrance into the east side, you know, there's only one opening there, or is that a problem at all for your vehicles?
Mayor, the access points we have because of the paved surfaces that surround the structure. Really there's two access points on the the east side and on the south side. So really the surfaces around the entire structure are not too concerning for us.
Okay. Any hydrant issues, or is the park was it laid out and developed correctly?
So, yeah, the development and the the underground plan reviews and those get in the position that we'll be in will be reviewed. We don't have any concerns with water supply for this project.
Okay. Thank you. And I'm sure it's fully sprinkled to boot.
Yeah, when the size of the building will be required for sprinkles and alarm systems.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions, comments? Okay, seeing none, we'll look for a motion on 6C, please.
Guzikowski makes a motion that the Plan Commission approves the site and building plans submitted by Samuel Dickman, the Dickman Company Incorporated, for the property at 10303 South Oakview Parkway with the following conditions. One, that all relevant code requirements are in effect. 2, that the plans are revised to include locations of all mechanicals, transformers, and utilities. All mechanical equipment, transformers, and utility boxes, ground, building, and rooftops shall be screened from view. 3, that all light sources are shielded and directed downward. That the color temperature of the fixtures are limited to a maximum of 3,500 kelvins, and that the light sources adjacent to the single-family residential areas are shielded on the side of the fixture adjacent to the residential area. 4, that the landscape plans are revised to incorporate staff comments regarding berm heights, berm plantings, and details for canopy and heights of all screening plants at the installation and maturity. 5, that a detailed master sign plan is reviewed and approved by the Plan Commission prior to the submission of sign permit applications. And 6, that all detailed revised plans are submitted in digital format to the Department of Community Development prior to submission of permit applications.
Oracle second.
Roll call.
Hannah, I.
Sullivan, I.
Grillo, I.
Lorik, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Ladani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, I.
Okay, thank you, commissioners. Thank you very much. Appreciate all the comments, neighbors. Thank you for, you guys really do know the area best. I really do appreciate you guys taking the time to comment and help guide us through this. It's most appreciated. So, staff, I want to thank you guys. Great job, without a doubt. You guys always seem to make it look easier than it really is. But do appreciate the way you guys get everything in line for us. So going forward, just very quickly before we adjourn, it is Thanksgiving. Believe it or not, we do have a lot to be thankful for in this country. Things haven't always shaken out the way we wanted to this year, but take the time to really appreciate those close to you. But give them some time. So keep it small, keep it intimate. It's going to be a little different Thanksgiving than we're accustomed to. And together we can help get these numbers down, get our kids back to school, and get our businesses healthy. Again, another announcement. Thanksgiving morning at 8 a.m. at Emerald Preserve in Town Square, we always do a turkey trek. And we ask that you bring a non-perishable good for somebody that maybe isn't faring as well and is less fortunate here during the pandemic. We will be gathering them. Alderman Guzekowski brings a trailer. We'd like to fill that up. We'll take it to a local food pantry. You're free to walk at your own pace. This is very informal. There's no cost. It's really giving back to the community. We'll practice social distancing. Please wear your masks. But start your day. We'd love to see a great crowd. Love to see all the commissioners there, if possible, at different times, so we're not a quorum, but it would be great. So with that, I'll just leave it, and I'll leave it at that and wish you all a very safe and happy Thanksgiving. So motion to adjourn.
Grillo moves to adjourn at 8:05.
Seifert seconds.
One last thing before the roll call. We will be lighting the square on December the 2nd at 5:30. The lights will magically go on. There's no gathering, but please pay attention. We do have a lead sponsor for that. It's the Martin Law Office. They paid for the entire month to light the square, set up and take down. We appreciate that. So.
Nice.
Roll call on adjournment, please.
Hannah, I.
Sullivan, I.
Grillo, I.
Lorik, aye.
Gavich, aye.
Guzekowski, aye.
Ladani, aye.
Seifert, aye.
Chandler, I.
Okay, we are finished, and just a few more meetings and we will be done with the rest of the year for planning. So nice job, commissioners. Thank you. Have a great Thanksgiving.